Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is Mile High Sports. I'm Shawn Drotar. Santa Claus is off. It is a Wednesday, July 24th, which means the Denver Broncos are at practice. That's right. Training camp is here. It's going to be a big week, obviously, for the Broncos getting underway, a big week in sports. The Olympics starts this week as well. As a matter of fact, as we're doing the show right now, the Olympics technically has already begun. The soccer tournament already underway. Obviously, a lot of games to go through there. The U.S. and France playing as we speak. So we'll see more of the Olympics coming up as well. Tremendous time to be a sports fan, which means it's terrific to get to talk to you today. Danny Bailey is the man behind all of this. Everything you see, everything you hear, it's all Danny Bailey, so we can't do it without Danny. Appreciate it. And we'll start the program, of course, with the Broncos, who get underway at camp. First practice today. And the idea going forward for this team, we've talked about it for a while, is not a Super Bowl. It's not even going for the division. It's not even for the wild card. The Broncos are just trying to figure out what direction they're going. In their second year under Sean Payton, the idea for the Broncos now is to figure out who they are, what they are, and how they get from point A to point B. Point A has them missing the playoffs for the longest stretch in the entire NFL, minus only the Jets. That's probably not going to stop this year. Perhaps it could be they could be all alone in last place, because the Jets, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, perhaps have a chance to make the playoffs as well in a very, very stacked AFC. But when you look at what's going on in the early going, we'll step aside with Bo Nix for a minute in the Broncos quarterback competition, because we're going to tell you the same thing I've been telling you for months. There is no quarterback competition. Stop it. Every time you hear quarterback competition, you know someone's looking for clicks or views or whatever. Bo Nix is QB1. It's just a matter of time till the Broncos give it to him. They would like him to be the starter on day one. That's the plan. And if they can pull it off, that's what they're going to do. So let's set that aside. But for Nix to succeed, for the Broncos to succeed, they have to find a way to get the ball to playmakers. And they don't have that many playmakers. We've talked about this as well. Courtland Sutton had a good year last year, 10 touchdowns, tied for one of the only 6 players in the league that had 10 or more receiving touchdowns. Really a remarkable number, given the fact the Broncos' passing offense was so abysmal. But what Nix needs to succeed is probably going to define this first week or so of training camp more than what Nix actually does. Because when Nix was drafted, the die was already cast. The Broncos have no desire to start Jarrett Stidham. Jarrett Stidham is in the last year of his contract. He's not expected to be the quarterback of the future. He'd be holding it down at best. Zach Wilson is a lawn dart, a toss up into the sky, hope it lands in the target, and hope you don't hit your own foot with it. So he's not expected to be the starter. If it happens to pan out and he's a younger player who plays well or looks promising, I guess you can sign him as a long-term backup. But even he's not being looked at as the starter. It's Bo Nix. So who can Nix throw to? We know about Courtland Sutton, but we talked about it yesterday. The idea that there is a stalemate there is a problem. The tight ends might be the most important part of this equation. Not only do they work as the security blanket for quarterbacks when they're under pressure, not only right now in the way the defenses are being called, with the nickel being the base defense across the NFL, do tight ends find a way to exploit that, but the Broncos have been trying to find a solution for a while. Their leader last year in receiving was Adam Troutman, 22 catches, 204 yards, 3 touchdowns. The 3 touchdown catches, believe it or not, was good for third on the Broncos. Only Brandon Johnson with 4 and Courtland Sutton with 10 were more than Troutman's 3, but only 204 total yards. Lucas Kroll, an interesting kind of prospect there, 8 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown in 7 games, but 8 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown sounds like an underwhelming game for Travis Kelce, let alone what you'd expect to hear from a starter over the course of the year. And then you have Greg Dulcich, the former pick for the Broncos, who's been dealing with injuries. 3 catches, 25 yards in 2 games, expected to be healthy, expected to get going. Sean Payton had an opportunity yesterday to talk specifically about Dulcich and the rest of the tight end room.
The tight ends to be back. We expect Greg to practice. I don't expect anyone to be on his piggyback or anything like that. I expect Lucas Kroll to make progress like he has. We were encouraged with what he did. And I think that position is important. These guys present different skill sets. Some guys block better, other guys are better receivers. Hopefully Greg can stay healthy, and we go from there.
Obviously not a lot of excitement or enthusiasm there. Troutman, of course, is the best blocker of the bunch. We know that. Dulcich maybe the best receiver of the bunch. And there is something to like about Kroll. Nate Atkins is there as well. Troutman, Dulcich, and Atkins all have 2 years left on their contract. Kroll is an exclusive rights free agent at the end of the season. So opportunities abound for all of these guys. Someone could step up and take that role. Troutman, of course, is the incumbent, and maybe most importantly, is the guy that's the best blocker, is probably still the guy to start. But there are other parts of the equation for the Broncos, too, that are interesting to watch in the early going. One of those is going to be the defensive line. Now, the addition of John Franklin Myers, a pretty adept move by George Payton, Shawn Payton, and the Broncos to land Franklin Myers, what the Jets being in a bit of a budget crunch, kind of fills out their defensive line. You used to have a starting line on the edges of both Josh Allen and John Franklin Myers. Allen, I think, a disappointment in his first year with the Broncos, but still reasons to be optimistic. And then moving DJ Jones into the middle where he has succeeded, especially for the 49ers. That front three makes things kind of interesting. Alex Singleton, who's plays behind them, of course, as the holdover middle linebacker, I had a chance to talk about how that new defensive line looks in front of him.
Time for 2 more questions.
I haven't seen them in pads yet, but what have been your early thoughts on the several additions you've made on the defensive line?
I love it. It's exciting. They're playing fast, physical. I'm excited for the pads to come on. We're playing an expensive O-line every day, so what they do to them is exciting for what we'll be able to do to other teams.
I love the comment. We're playing an expensive O-line every single day. Well, he's exactly right, and we'll have more about that in a couple of moments as well. But then maybe the more interesting part about playmakers that we've discussed, one of the ones that comes up a lot is Marvin Mims Jr., a Pro Bowler last year, second-team All-Pro as a return specialist. When you look at Mims' talent, you look at Mims' speed, you think that there might be a bigger opportunity for him to get into the receiving game. But that really didn't happen last year. Only 22 catches, 377 yards, and a touchdown. The Broncos actually added some receiver depth. The idea that Mims is obviously going to be the number 3 guy behind Sutton and Reynolds, or Josh Reynolds out of Detroit that they brought over, don't make that assumption, because Troy Franklin may very well have that spot in position. He's obviously got some rapport with Nix from their time at Oregon. And don't forget that Brandon Johnson, who I've mentioned a couple times, was second on the Broncos in receiving touchdowns. He's a young player as well. Keep in mind in the early going, Marvin Mims might be, not only in the short term, but in the long term, more valuable to the Broncos as a return specialist than a receiver, even though they like his big game ability. They like his ability to get into space and go ahead and make big plays. But the Broncos also have some other players that can do that, maybe not to the extent. What they don't have is another receiver like Mims. And when you're talking about the ability to catch, it's great, but you need to be able to return the kicks. Broncos have been looking for return game specialists for years. They found one in Mims. He was effective at both kickoffs and punts. And now with the kickoff return rules changing, things dramatically alter. It'll look more like the XFL did if you watched any. And if you didn't, you're forgiven. It will make more sense as we go. But in the long play of this, what it is likely to do by design is increase the number of returns and increase the number of opportunities for returns, because instead of the big long run up between two sides and then have them smash into each other, it's really going to be set up more by savvy teams and special teams, almost as if you're blocking for a running play or a reverse or a pitch. That's the way these returns are going to look based on what we've seen at the XFL level. That's probably going to be the case here. And if you have a guy like Mims, he's really valuable. Here's thinking that Mims might really be, instead of a receiver, he's the return guy, and that might be enough of a weapon. Mims was asked specifically earlier today about the new kickoff rules.
It's been different, just with the kickoff rule. There's a lot of unknown things about it. We'll see what happens in the preseason. It's been a lot of fun for us because, we always try to have the head up on other teams. But, going in the preseason, we'll see a lot of good things. We'll see a lot of bad things. So we're just really looking forward to preseason, seeing what other teams do, and as long as ourselves and how it works.
Are you anticipating that some teams you can't squib it because you got to do the linear, but your low line drives to kind of make it difficult to field it there inside the team?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of teams are going to do low line drives, try to hit it on the 15, and it's going to be hard to pick up because right when the ball hits the ground, the defense can come at us and kind of starts that and cuts off a lot of the field. So we'll see what teams do. We'll see how we'll kind of react to it, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to be figured out during the preseason for the kickoff rule.
Time for 2 more questions.
Do you think you will be able to take advantage of it as much as anyone, given your proficiency at returning? I mean, it's almost like an extended offensive play for someone like you.
Yeah, just knowing our coaching staff, how they drew things up last year and what they're starting to put today, I think it's going to be a real good play for us. I think that's going to be one of our hidden gems this year is the kickoff rule. But, there's a lot of getting used to it, a lot of understanding that we got to kind of catch up on fast because, just like I said, we got 3 preseason games and we got the first week of the season. So we want to kind of know what we're doing, get there for the first game.
Also have the opportunity for the joint practice with the Packers that will happen at the tail end of training camp as well, and you might see some of that. But exactly right. It is essentially an extended offensive play. And if that's the case, it makes Mims very valuable. So for the Broncos, this is going to be, and I think Mims hit it right, it's going to be a hidden gem. It's going to be one of the Broncos' secret weapons. And it means that Mims may very well be, in fact, probably will be more valuable to the Broncos as a return man than a receiver. And I would suspect, as you watch the early week or so of camp, we'll all see that come to pass. So you heard Alex Singleton talk about the expensive offensive line that they're going against. We'll talk a little bit about that and what it means for the Broncos. But I want to remind you that if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, you can find all of it in the same place. And you can find it in the place that's been in the heart of Denver for more than a century. Look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in that heart of downtown Denver. As a DAC member, you enjoy top-notch amenities like a full fitness center, licensed childcare center, spa, massage, Pilates, a golf simulator, and even more. But what truly sets the DAC apart, what has kept it in the heart of Denver's consciousness for over that 100 years, is its vibrant community. It's a member-owned club. It's all about you, year-round social events, co-working, dining, fun for the entire family. The DAC is really a club for your whole life. And now for a limited time, new members only, and they own it. So, you get to be part of this from the ground level. They'll pay $0 in initiation fees. Right now, initiation fees are waived for new members. So join the DAC today. Give it a try and find out what's made it the heart of Denver for over 100 years. Going back to the Broncos and the offensive line, Quinn Meinerz got a new deal, an extension, basically an extension to his existing deal, and the numbers we'll have for you in just a moment. But what they really illustrate, and I think it's valuable to know about it, is that this really shows you where the Broncos' planned path to contention is. I get it. It's the NFL. You want to go try to win the championship every year. But you also have to realistically find out where you are. The Broncos, for now most of a decade, have basically deluded themselves thinking that they were somewhere closer to the championship than they actually were. Now, given at least the actions, if not the words, the Broncos and Sean Payton understand they are rebuilding. That's a good thing. Embracing it and understanding it gives you a better chance of success. The only way to actually correct things that have gone wrong is to first identify them, 2, accept them, admit them, and then 3, look about what you can do differently to make it better. The Broncos are finally doing that, and their deal with Meinerz is part of it. Over the next couple of years, you'll be able to see the numbers on the screen there. $3.57 million salary cap this year and $5.53 million after that. But then it makes a big jump into the $19 and $22 million, and then in the final year, a small amount, 2029, which there is no guaranteed money remaining on. So for Meinerz, that's obviously a good deal and a well-earned deal, because what he gets on top of that is $21.7 million in cash and total bonuses. Basically, year one, $24 million. So he gets paid right off the bat. $45 million of that is guaranteed, about $8 million more in incentives. It would max out at $80 million. As always, when you hear it in the NFL, a number of years and the dollar amount, realize that's probably never what the player will entirely get, but could max out at $80 million. Realistically, he has a 4-year, $45 million deal, which is rather team friendly. That's valuable. So good reporting there by Parker Gabriel of the Denver Post, by the way, on those specific numbers. Make sure you give Parker a follow on social, Parker J. Gabriel, for the Denver Post for all those details. But for the Broncos, it makes things rather interesting. It shows where they're really going money-wise, because as you heard Singleton speak about it, the Broncos offensive line, it's expensive. Garrett Bowles is the highest paid player on the team this year at $20 million. Mike McGlinchey this year has a cap hit of $7.4 million, but it jumps to $23.8 million the year after that. He was signed in the last offseason. Ben Powers signed in the last offseason as well. $6.5 million this year, jumps to $17.4 million in 2025. So now you're looking at 2026. At that point, Meinerz will make 19. McGlinchey will make 23.8. Powers will make 17.9. Garrett Bowles would have to have a new deal. But right there, you're talking about $60 million in three players, three $20 million a year players along the offensive line. Garrett Bowles' situation will have to be cleared up. My suspicion, we talked about this yesterday. If you missed any part of the show, you can always go to Mile High Sports or check the earlier ones on this YouTube channel. Garrett Bowles probably isn't his last year with the Broncos unless there's a team-friendly deal, in part because Garrett Bowles will be 33 next year. He wasn't drafted when he was young. So the Broncos are investing in that, knowing that about 2026, not this year, and maybe not next year, but 2026, if everything goes right, they might find themselves in a spot where they can make some noise. That, of course, comes back to Bo Nix. Investing in the offensive line gives Bo Nix the best opportunity to succeed. And in this case, the Broncos know who their QB1 is, at least as long as he can hold it. But there is a challenge there. Sean Payton, over the course of his career, has had only one rookie ever start a game at quarterback for him. That was Ian Book, their fourth-round selection back in 2021. Book started exactly one game, threw 2 interceptions, and never played again. Not for the Saints, not for anyone. He's in camp right now, but he hasn't played in the NFL ever since. That's the only time a rookie quarterback has ever started a game for Sean Payton. Sean Payton, at least last year, didn't seem to give any indication of that. Had fully embraced I know what I'm doing. I'm the quarterback whisperer. I've got all of this. But after last year, either humbled a little bit or all in on the rebuild, because listen to the difference in tone today when asked about the idea of grooming young quarterbacks.
I look, it's new to me relative to a first round pick and all of that. And yet, we went through a similar thing when Drew retired, and it was Jameis and Taysom, and we had a lot of competition. And so I don't think I stress over it, but I focus on it and pay attention closely to it. Look, the most important thing we do here in the next month is, and I say this respectfully to everyone, is find the right 53 and not let a good player out of the building. Try not to. We've one of our interns out here, Todd Davis, that you guys got to see play here for a long time. We had him kind of hidden in a room.
We know the story.
Trying to hang on to him. He gets claimed. He's got to come, and I regret that.
Okay.
We don't want guys like that getting out of the building, and then he ends up, playing well and for another team. So we were deep there, maybe, I'm not sure, but so that's the most important thing. Finding the right 53.
But when you're talking about that quarterback position, that tone from Payton is very, very different. The understanding that it is relatively new to him, and it would be. Only one rookie's ever started even a single game, and it was a disaster. That wasn't necessarily Sean Payton's fault, but it's new, and that matters a great deal. That comment that you heard, combined with the one we played with you yesterday, with the idea that he talked about how he wasn't going to explain the way they were going to rotate practicing for the quarterbacks. He wasn't going to spend the time explaining how that was going to work because the players themselves were going to dictate that. They'd earn more snaps. They'd earn different spots in the rotation. There's no reason to try to lay it out. And he's exactly right. There isn't. This is going to unfold naturally. It is also going to unfold with the end result already known. Bo Nix will be the Broncos starting quarterback, probably in week 1. Is it possible that he wouldn't probably start week 1 if things were problematic? I suppose they could start Jarrett Stidham for a game, but the plan is to start Bo Nix. The plan was always to start Bo Nix. 61 career starts. No player has ever started more college football games. Nobody is more ready to take the leap. And if he's not ready, well, then you picked the wrong guy. So the plan is to get Bo Nix in. But you do have to let this play out. You do have to make sure that Nix earns the spot. And that leads us back to Meinerz. Meinerz had a chance to talk about his new deal, but also the job now of bringing up 3 different quarterbacks simultaneously and letting them decide who takes the reins.
Yeah, I think it's another one of those things that I look at personally, and I think our unit does as well, of controlling what we can control. And so at the end of the day, I have things just like the rest of us need to work on, whether it be run game or pass game. And so whoever the quarterback is, we still have the same job to do regardless. And I'm excited to see how this competition goes and excited to see what happens.
Quinn, Andrew Mason, DenverSports.com. When you were sitting out that 2020 season because the year was wiped out and you were just working out, could you have envisioned how this would go and what led you to this point today?
No, to put it short, I didn't know that this was going to be the journey that I was going to be on. I kind of said it in my interview yesterday that I really made things small and didn't try to, look at the possibilities of this journey.
The story about Meinerz, of course, is terrific. Coming out of Wisconsin Whitewater, you saw him during the pandemic working out by old school, right? Grabbing logs and jugs of water and moving it around, and has worked himself into being one of the very best guards in the league. And that's not only an impressive story, but the fact that he understands the objective, not only from his personal side, but from the team side as well. Understanding these are different quarterbacks. They'll be expected to do different things, whether it's practice, whether it's preseason. They have the necessity to be ready and to be versatile and to be flexible is critical. Meinerz is probably, at this point, the very best offensive player the Broncos have. That is not a condemnation of Meinerz, but it is a concern when you look at the National Football League in general. And when you say that the team's best offensive player is the right guard, that can occasionally be problematic. But at least they are in a good spot with Meinerz. And we'll find out as they continue to rotate out. Of course, 4 returning linemen when you're talking about Bowles, Powers, McGlinchey, and Meinerz. The center position will be up for grabs. Sam Mustafa, the veteran, probably has the inside track, but Alex Forsythe, a former teammate briefly of Bo Nix at Oregon, and Luke Wattenberg will have an opportunity to claim that as well. Something to keep an eye out in the early going. So the Broncos underway down at Dove Valley. We'll be out there on Friday broadcasting live from the practice facility. So looking forward to that as well, and something for you to look forward to hopefully as well. Keep in mind, by the way, we're going to touch on the Denver Nuggets in a minute with our friend Doug Ottewill, but want to introduce you. Maybe you haven't had a chance to learn about Constitute Health. Our friends at Constitute Health are trying to find a way to optimize everyone's health individually. Your own health is you. Everybody has their own individual profile, the things that they deal with health-wise. It can be weight. It can be all energy. It can be a lot of different things as you continue to get older, for men and for women. And you are unique. And that's part of what they're trying to work with at Constitute Health. They're empowering patients in their own journey, complementing existing healthcare and using their relationships with compounding pharmacies, allowing to ship directly and discreetly to patients nationwide. That saves money for inpatient visits and your precious time and your money as well. So oftentimes you have to find out about your health, and you get specific analysis with our friends at Constitute Health after you get your blood work. The trained medical professionals then go on a one-on-one basis with you, providing you with complete transparency regarding your health, your concerns, and your goals, providing options that make it quick and easy for you to be able to optimize your health in the way you'd like. You're building the foundation for your own health and longevity. There are cutting-edge medical techniques in which you can do that, whether it's hormone replacement, semaglutide, GLP-1 therapies, peptides, NAD pluses, and more. The therapies help patients burn fat, assist with weight loss, optimize your sleep and sleep cycles, as well as enhance cognitive and executive functions and build muscle mass and many other benefits, depending on what you want. But that's the part of it. You focus on what you want for your health, what your particular goals are, and the folks at Constitute Health, the professionals and doctors there, they will work with you to make sure that you reach that goal. Check them out at constitutehealth.com. Mention MHS and get $50 off your initial blood work and consultation, or you can just, when you visit MHS, you can click that Constitute link as well on the website and get $50 off your initial visit. So about $125, and you can get a picture of what your body's been trying to tell you via blood work, and at Constitute Health, they can help you get to where you want to go. So visit them at constitutehealth.com. The Denver Nuggets are awaiting the potential arrival of one Russell Westbrook. Westbrook traded to the Utah Jazz in a deal for Chris Dunn, expected to reach a buyout at some point in the relatively near future, at which point he is expected to join the Denver Nuggets on the 1-year, $4 million deal that was his team option with the Clippers that he decided to re-up. That led to the trade. For the Denver Nuggets, at which point the salary cap is a challenge. Beggars can't be choosers. Joining us to discuss it is the editor-in-chief of Mile High Sports Magazine and, of course, a longtime Nuggets fan and expert, Doug Ottewill. Doug, thanks for joining us. Before we dig too deep into what Russell Westbrook could do, and we realize we're projecting, this feels like a fait accompli, but until all the ink is dry, you don't know what's going to happen. But your first thoughts of Russell Westbrook, who has been a tormentor for the Nuggets now for 10 years, of Russell Westbrook perhaps trying to be the guy to come to the Nuggets and help the championship window get propped back open?
I think they're just waiting for his results from Constitute Health. I think he has to go there first and make sure, as you mentioned, what 10, I don't know how many years he's been in the league exactly, but he's not a spring chicken. I think my initial gut, kind of as you asked, is it's a good move. I think I like the move. I think he can be a good fit. I don't think the Nuggets have necessarily gotten significantly better. They spent all last year trying to figure out the Bruce Brown problem, never really did. Maybe they kind of will this year with some of those guys that have another year of experience. And then, I kind of look at Westbrook as a replacement for KCP. So at the end of the day, I think that it's kind of, it's two steps backwards, one step forward, or one backward, two forward. It's somewhere right in there. I'm glad they did it. But I'm not so sure that, that it's the piece. I think it's a good piece. I'm not so sure that it addresses everything.
Yeah, it feels like a calculated risk, right? Because of the salary challenges, you have to go ahead and make whatever moves you can. And when you have a veteran with experience, there's value there. I mean, let me give you these numbers just for comparison. When you go into last year's regular season, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope averaged 10.1 points per game. Westbrook was 11.1. KCP on the rebounds was at a 2.4 per game. Obviously, Westbrook's a very good rebounding guard, 5 still last year. 4.5 assists per game for Westbrook. When you were looking at KCP, again, 2.4. So across the counting stats, Westbrook looks like he's still a better player, even though he played in a career low 22.1 minutes per game last year. That's lower than KCP's nearly 32 minutes per game. The idea of having him as a KCP replacement, though, the difference is that Westbrook will be 35 years old, and the shot over the last couple of years has completely dropped off. Christian Brown is now expected to start instead of KCP, and Westbrook would come off the bench. When that settled with the Clippers, it played rather well. But that was Russell Westbrook sitting because James Harden was starting. Do you think that Russell Westbrook would look at Christian Brown and say, well, I should be starting over him, and is that a risk for the Nuggets?
Well, I would hope that the Nuggets have had that conversation already, and that he's on board with it, because I like the idea of Westbrook coming off the bench. He's not, as you mentioned, he's not KCP when it comes to knocking down an open shot. But what I think he could be is a floor general and sort of a different kind of a force on a second unit. Now, that, the great unknown is whether Christian Brown can become a better shooter. He's got to become a better knockdown, open shot. We're not expecting him to make his own shots a la Jamal Murray, but I think he's got to be able to knock down those shots. If he can do that, I think it's a really nice piece to the first unit, making Westbrook even more effective on the second unit. Because I think that the Westbrook would have to sign off on, hey, this is what we're going to do. Now, obviously, both of us are speculating in that he will be the second unit sort of general. But I guess there's a possibility that Christian Brown doesn't work out and he slides into the starting unit. But I like him more as the guy that's going to head up that second unit, kind of like Bruce Brown. I think, we're going to be trying to replace Bruce Brown for a long time in a lot of different ways and never quite get there. I think Westbrook can be a step in the right direction. And I think it has to be in that second unit. If he comes in and he's just in the first unit, I think his lack of shooting, especially on the floor with Jokic, could be problematic. It sort of takes one of the bullets out of the chamber, so to speak.
It does. And while Westbrook is obviously still a gifted passer, the turnovers are higher than they used to be. But that has to do a little bit with the shot, because obviously when you're not worried, it's not quite Aaron Gordon. They're not completely sagging off of Russell Westbrook when he's out by the 3-point line. But you've seen more and more of that in the last year. Obviously, if you're going to be sagged off and they're daring you to shoot, they're playing the passing lane. It makes it hard for you to pass. So that removes that ability for Westbrook to use that part of his game. But what he can do, and very few Nuggets can, is he can put downhill pressure on a defense. offense. And I agree with you. On a second unit, if he is comfortable with doing that, I'm okay with letting Russell Westbrook, well, we can bring it back. Let Russ cook. Let him do his thing. Let him drive and kick and do that kind of game that he's done before. And then I think he can be very effective for the Nuggets in that role. But you bring up the Christian Brown idea, and he's got to become, if not a knockdown shooter, but the catch and shoot game's got to get better. This has been my thought process, and we'll see. Everyone I've brought it up to more or less laughs it out of the room. I'm still going to go with it. We'll see what you think. I'm of the belief, especially what we saw at Summer League, that quite frankly, the Denver Nuggets might be better served because, as we well know, KCP was the fifth offensive option when the starters were on the court. Whoever takes that role is going to be as well. And if it's Christian Brown, so be it. But I look at Julian Strawther, his ability to shoot, his size, and thinking that that should be the guy that might better profile as your number 2 guard, allowing a combination of Westbrook, Brown, Peyton Watson, and Dario Saric coming off the bench, in which case I think you have a really dangerous second unit. We look at that starting role and look at the starting 2 and say, how do you replace KCP? Well, you're replacing a guy that got 10 points a game on mainly catch and shoot and didn't do a lot of other things statistically. It's not that he wasn't valuable. Great on-ball defender, very talented player. But he's the fifth option. Isn't it an idea that Strawther could do that if you're just talking about the fifth option? Because you and I both know it's not about who starts the game. It's about who's on the floor in the last 5 minutes.
Absolutely. And I think Strawther could definitely fill that role offensively. I think where the rub might be, and especially in the context of Michael Malone, is can he be a competent replacement for KCP on the defensive end? Because KCP was an excellent defensive player. And, you know, that's a Michael Malone thing, especially. So if early in this, if hypothetically he's the guy that's getting the start and Christian Brown's sort of a bigger anchor on that second unit, I think watching Strawther on the defensive end is the key as to whether or not he can continue to be a starter. I think Christian Brown is one of my favorite players because the guy plays so hard. And when he plays his role, which he has mastered in the postseason, I think we've yet to see that in the regular season. But when he's used as that guy that's a spark, that's a defensive pest, that is, you know, slashing to the basket, he's as good as it gets in that role. But I think if he can add a shot, he and Russell Westbrook as the backcourt in the second unit, that instantly makes that second unit better. And I think what that would do is it helps the depth, because I think one of the, you know, obviously there were always 12 guys on the bench all year long, but Michael Malone did not trust that second unit as a whole necessarily at all, but for certainly not extended minutes. So I think if you have a better second unit and Brown and Westbrook could really sort of be the catalyst for that, I think you get more minutes out of them just by default. It's a shame, you know, that there still really isn't an adequate backup for Nikola Jokic, because I think that will be the place where the minutes get strained. And the one guy that you can't afford to, you know, wear down by the time the playoffs. I mean, I don't know if you caught KCP on the podcast the other day with Draymond, but, you know, he basically said, yeah, we got worn down. The Lakers should have beat us, I think he said. And I think that speaks volumes, because he wasn't going out and saying we didn't play well, we didn't have this guy, or he didn't even say we don't have Bruce Brown. I mean, by default, he said we were taxed because we as starters had to play a lot more. And I think if you can get just a little bit more out of that second unit in terms of minutes and productivity, I think that they are closer to solving the Bruce Brown / KCP problem than they were last year.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, because I read that a little bit as a very light touch of shade on Michael Malone's coaching. The fact that over the course of the year, they did not have enough to make sure that those starters got some time. And I guess when I look at it, you know, we haven't had a chance to talk about it. The loss of Deron Holmes, their draft pick, who was expected to basically share some time at the 4 and the 5 and maybe be that rim protector and backup to Nikola Jokic, lost for the season, presumably with the Achilles injury. It is tough to look at it and say that a rookie who hadn't even played an NBA game, his loss might really be the thing that sinks the Nuggets. But you know what, Doug? His loss might really be the thing that sinks the Nuggets. They don't
Yeah.
have the depth otherwise.
I agree, because I do think they had high hopes for them or for him. And I think, the more you heard about him as things started to come out after the Nuggets drafted him, I think it was all about he was a guy that was mature. He understood roles. He was a hard worker. He didn't feel like a rookie in a traditional current NBA rookie sense. So I think that there was big plans for him. I think if you really want to go back and say where the wheels came off, it's making some really bad signings in the backup center role with Zeke Naji, because that seemed like a mystery at the time.
Yes,
and I remember people saying, well, they're just doing that so they can trade him. Well, you got to have a commodity that somebody wants to begin with. And I think regardless of what his salary could do for someone else's salary cap, he can't play. And if he can, we've never really seen it in any kind of extended form. So I think, it's a shame that their plans for their rookie class, kind of went out the window right away. But at the same time, that falls bigger on Zeke Naji's contract than anything else, in my opinion.
It does. Calvin Booth signed him to that deal, making just about $9 million a year, $8.9 million this year. He is the 5th highest paid player on the Denver Nuggets. And even if they add Russell Westbrook, he will remain so. That is a remarkable mistake. And as you pointed out rightly, the idea is you can have a contract to trade him. Like, wait, if he hasn't established himself as a player, then what good is the contract? And it turns out this contract is actually pretty expensive for a guy who hasn't been able to carve out any minutes. It feels like the Nuggets now, Najee is only 24. It feels like Michael Malone, when you talked about coaching this year, is going to have to do some things he doesn't want to do. You may simply have to force feed Zeke Naji, and you may have to live with 10 minutes on the floor with him, because if you don't, Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic will be wiped out by the end of the year. You may have to coach around his deficiencies. And that's one thing I think the last step in Michael Malone's coaching career that I think he needs to take is he needs to be able to step out of his comfort zone and deal with the fact that, look, maybe this isn't the team you wanted. Maybe the second unit isn't the team you wanted, but nobody gets that. Steve Kerr doesn't get that. Greg Popovich doesn't get that. Eric Spoelstra doesn't get that. They've won rings like you have as well, but you have to coach the guys you've got. And the only way to get back to the top of the mountain is to make sure that you are putting them on a level in which they've never been. And that requires coaching. That, to me, is the final hurdle for Michael Malone to take if he is going to be considered a truly great NBA coach. Do you think he's capable of doing it?
It's a great point. And I think that, it's funny because, and I know you and Sandy have talked about it pretty much all summer, is it a Calvin Booth problem or is it a Michael Malone problem? I think at this point, pointing the finger or establishing who screwed up last year doesn't do much good.
Well, it was both. The sign of the Najee contract was a mistake. Malone didn't coach up the younger players like he needed to. It was both. Now they're stuck. There's no money to do much more than what they've got. So if this is all you've got, then it lands now soon enough on Malone.
Yeah, and I think that it is a great point you make, because when you talk about great coaches that have a perfect second team, they really don't exist. But Michael Malone had one as close as there was in that championship run. And he did a phenomenal job. I'll never take that away from him.
Oh.
But you're not always dealt the perfect hand, just as you said, especially on that second team. And so, this is a test for him. I mean, up until the championship, I criticized Malone pretty regularly with a lot of things that he did, whether it was development of young guys, whether it was insistence on playing Will Barton, whether it's how he, handled post-game conferences and throwing people under the bus. I up until the championship, there was a lot of things I questioned about Michael Malone. When he won, I was the first guy to say, man, this guy pushed all the right buttons and did all the right things along the way. And I mean, obviously the 16-4 record was indication that he was on his game with a very good team. And that's fine. Every championship team is a good team. But I think there are those championship teams that win, going clear back to, Michael Jordan's Bulls or the Showtime Lakers, where when they put in their second string guys, they got to figure out how to not lose a lead. And that is Michael Malone's challenge this year. And I think you bring up a great point. If he can coach a team that has some deficiencies, especially, you go from the greatest player in the world to an overpaid guy that could barely get on the floor last year, and you can still overcome that. I think that does speak volumes to how well Michael Malone's going to accept this challenge. And he does have to accept the challenge. I mean, one thing that I've always said about Malone, I think he's stubborn for one, and I think that I don't want to say throws a tantrum, but there are times when you can kind of tell he's digging in his heels and saying, well, if I would have had this, or we would have done it this way, or this guy would have played harder, or we would have played better. Like, he's not big on accountability. And I think that, this is a chance for him to say, this is what I got. And if I'm a coach worthy of another championship, I got to make it work. And I think that's something that's going to be a really fun storyline to watch this year. I hope it's fun.
Yeah, at the very least, I think if they add Russell Westbrook, you're going to get some entertainment out of it for sure. And
Malone will trust Westbrook. I really believe that.
I do too. And I think there's value in that, especially if he's on that second unit. So last one for you, Doug. If it turns out that the Nuggets, who started in 1967 and have won exactly one championship, if it turns out in the rest of Jokic's prime, they don't win another one, knowing especially in the last few years that you had 6 different NBA championships and the previous 5 have bounced out of the second round of the next year, does the Nuggets championship get lessened to you? That's one of the things that's fascinating. You and I are Colorado natives. We've been lifers here. We've watched the Nuggets our whole life. To me, I guess I look at it and think, if that was it, and the Nuggets put together a bunch of good runs, but come up in the end short and don't win another title, I look at it and think, hey, I'm just happy I saw it. I never believed that the Nuggets in the NBA would probably ever win a title, and they got it done. But there is a thought process now that you have the best player in the world in Nikola Jokic, and that if you don't win multiples, then maybe it was a fluke. I'm curious if you see it that way.
I think there's definitely that reality. I mean, regardless of what you and I grew up with, and if you'd have asked us last May if we would take one and that would be the end for the rest of our life, would we take that? We would have signed off on that 100 times. But I think once you win one, you get greedy, and you also see what you had. I mean, the fact that they were so dominant in that run. I mean, I mentioned the 16-4, and it didn't feel like any series was close, even the Phoenix one. I just felt like they did have a team, and it's hard. It really is hard in the current cap, as evidenced by the one-time champ run that we've never really seen before.
Right.
I think that there's a reality that says, hey, look, this is the new league. But I also think look at the Broncos, and if you said, hey, if John Elway would have won one, do you think that his career would have been lessened? Or in retrospect, I don't think so, because he got a lot of those teams to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little bit of what does happen next. Do they get bounced in the second round from here on out, or worse? Well, then it looks a little bit diminished. I think if they make a good run, and it's not like they're in a West that has a dynasty like the Lakers of the 80s or the Bulls of the 90s. I mean, it's kind of a free for all every year. So I think that if they are among those top, 2 or 3 teams that always are right there in the mix, and they get to another one, or they get to one and they win one, then I think you're looking at it and say, okay, we didn't waste it. We excelled in this new landscape. If they never go any further than they did this past spring, then I think we look at it as it was a wasted opportunity. There's no guarantee you win a championship, but I felt like this year they just didn't give themselves a shot. I mean, they were the odds-on favorite going into the playoffs, if memory serves, and they fell flat. And I think the reasons that they fell flat became really obvious once the playoffs started.
Yeah, and they landed on a lot of different people, not just Michael Malone. So we'll find out what they do. He is Doug Ottewill, editor-in-chief of My Life Sports Magazine. He's cooking up a new one as we speak, so get ready for that as well. Doug, always good to talk to you. Appreciate it. And obviously, we'll take a detour from the Broncos and look at the Nuggets, because the Broncos haven't won a championship since 2015. Maybe it feels like a while since the Nuggets have won one to fans, but you're right. Maybe getting a little greedy. We'll see what they do this fall. Thanks for the time.
You bet. See you, Shawn.
All right, thanks. Doug brought up an interesting point. The idea that once you win one, you get greedy. between 1918 and up until 2004, the Boston Red Sox had not won a World Series. They ended up getting one in 2004, and then, they got a little bit greedy. They won another one over the Colorado Rockies in 2007, and then they've won 2 since. They're in Colorado right now. They played last night, and they're playing as we speak. We'll tell you more about that in just a moment, but I want to remind you that we appreciate every single one of you who subscribes to the podcast and the video in every way that you go ahead and consume this show right here on Mile High Sports. And we appreciate you listening to it on demand. We know that that's in many people's situations the very best way to listen to it. So we're glad we can produce that for you. But we have plenty of other podcasts you can listen to. We talked about the Denver Nuggets there with Doug. Ryan Blackburn keeps you up to date on what's happening with the Nuggets with the Pickaxe and Roll podcast. You get Ryan here a lot on this program as well. You know how good he is. You want to check that out. The Avalanche aren't as far away from getting back into action as you think after a pretty interesting offseason. Arif Dean is always on the ice with the Avalanche, so check out the podcast Hockey Mountain High. Mile High baseball fans know they can get the latest on the Rockies with Drew Kreisman and the 20th and Blake podcast. And we know Bo Nix is going to be the answer for the Broncos, at least in the short term, but you can get the latest of how that's going and more on the Broncos podcast with Troy Rank. Our friend from the Denver Post is featured on the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. So all of that and much, much more, just make sure you search Mile High Sports wherever you get your podcast. So for the Colorado Rockies, last night did not go so well. That's putting it kindly. They were blasted 6-0 by the visiting Red Sox. Ty Block, the reliever to converted starter who's had a good moments over the course of this season here and there, got absolutely smoked. 6 earned runs on 7 hits in 2.1 innings, and the game was basically over from there. The Rockies did not fall into those really bad habits. 7 strikeouts as a team, only 1 walk. That's not as bad as usual. We'd like to get more walks, but it's when the Rockies get into double-digit strikeouts as a team that there was a problem. Chris Bryant came back last night, 0 for 3 with 2 Ks for the batting average to drop to 180. But that was last night. You go to today, for example, and let's just say things are going better. In the finale of this set with the Boston Red Sox, the Rockies will be off tomorrow and start a 10-game road trip on Friday. The Rockies, as we look at it right now in the 5th inning lead, 13-3. They have absolutely ignited. Bryant, by the way, 2 hits in this game, bringing his average up in real time to 196, closing in on that Mendoza line. That's not all that great, but then again, if your batting average has gone up 16 points in a day, that's not terrible either. The interesting story of late, however, is Ezequiel Tovar. Tovar in this game got the Rockies started off with a leadoff home run, his 17th of the season to take the Rockies lead. He was tied with Michael Toglia and with Brendan Doyle, who had 16. Tovar is on some sort of absolutely bonkers heater after starting, or at least ending June, in a miserable slump. But now the man is going off. The last time he had a game in which he did not have a hit was the 8th of July. At this point, and let me see, you only have so many fingers here to count on, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that'd be 11. An 11-game hitting streak for Tovar now, and in most of those, he's had more than 1 hit. Gold Glove caliber defense. He's been the Rockies' best player. One of the visiting players for the Red Sox doesn't get a chance to play. Unfortunately, he is injured, but knows more than a little bit about playing shortstop for the Colorado Rockies. One Trevor Story has been impressed with what he saw.
He's been impressive, man. McMahon's still one of my best friends, and Chuck. I keep up on those guys. And Tovar's all over the place, man. He's an electric player. He's got speed. I feel like he's plus defender. He does a lot. A lot of things. There's not much that he can't do on the field. From what I hear, he's a great teammate, a great guy, and he's fun to watch, man. So yeah, he's definitely doing his part. It's cool to see him carry on that tradition a little bit.
And there really is a tradition when you think about it. You go from Tovar and then Story and Troy Tulowitzki before him, and there's been consistent play there, and it's important in a field in which you have to be aware of extra base hits. Things get through the infield, they become doubles, it becomes problematic. But Tovar's been absolutely stellar. Another good game going thus far. The 2 hits though this far, including the home run, another pair of RBI. He has just been outstanding. And the bright side is when you see young players have those lengthy slumps into the 30 plus at bats in which you're getting 1 or no hits, which Tovar had, and then snaps out of it like this, in which for a 10-game span he's hitting nearly 500. then you don't worry about it. That's the ups and downs of a good baseball player. When you look at the way baseball players grow, the first year you surprise people. If you're very talented, like Tovar is, you can surprise people and you can sneak up and you can put up really good stats because they haven't seen you. The second year, however, when everyone's seen you before, things change pretty dramatically. And so that's when you often see guys regress in that second year. That is normal. Even stars go through that when you regress in your second season. That's sort of the great filter of baseball, right? First, you show that you are capable of playing at the major league level, which Tovar did. Then the league adjusts to you, which it has been doing a little bit. And certainly at the tail end of June especially, it got the better of Tovar. But then you cross through that barrier and show that you can still succeed despite that. Now that the book's out on you, now that they know how to play you, how can you come back and succeed? Tovar's done that. The batting stroke has been solid. The defense has never wavered, trying to get out there and run a little bit, as Story alluded to. Tovar seems to have all the earmarks of not only just a solid player, but maybe even a star. And even better, so does Brenton Doyle, who last year kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people and certainly was known as a plus defender with a plus arm, maybe a plus arm, as they say in the scouting world. But Doyle wasn't considered much of a hitter. This year, quite a bit better, hitting 277. He's 1 for 3 in today's game, in which the Rockies are piling it on to the Red Sox. Nick Pivetta ends up getting pulled after giving up 10 hits and 7 earned runs in 2 2/3 innings. Cal Quantrill, by the way, 5 1/3, only 2 earned runs in another good start. Quantrill's ERA, 4.12. Maybe one of the guys, as strange as it sounds, obviously he's been one of the Rockies' best pitchers, but the trade deadline is next week. Quantrill should be on the block. He only signed through this year, and he's a guy that can bring a little bit of a return for the Rockies as they continue to grow this rebuild. There's things to like about it. Tovar is part of it. Doyle is part of it. Brendan Rodgers, obviously health has been a challenge, but he's 3 for 3 today. He's been part of it. Even Michael Toglia, the batting average is bad. He is over 200 now, 208 after having a couple of hits today, but the power's there. There's a lot to be excited about. We talked about Charlie Condon, the number 3 overall pick in the draft. Condon's going to come to the majors relatively quickly. It would not be a shock to see him in the majors, but for the end of next year. He's that kind of player. He's experienced, and the batting eye is already there. The ability to play multiple positions is there. The Rockies actually have a lot to like in their rebuild. The question is, will they continue to jumpstart it? We'll find that out. The Rockies look pretty good as it stands right now against the Red Sox. Taking 2 or 3 from the Red Sox at home would be a pretty good look, especially as they'll be heading out for a 10-game road trip. We'll see if Chris Bryant can remain part of that as well. Obviously, Bryant back after missing 43 games. Getting a couple hits today. He's playing DH. That's probably where he's going to play a lot, since Toglia seems to be playing over at first, though he does have an error today. And it gives the Rockies a little more opportunity for offense. Obviously, you're not going to force feed it when you're talking about a guy like Chris Bryant. If he's not healthy, you're not going to play him, and they've got to be careful about it. But whatever they can get out of him is good. Sunk cost. They owe him $108 million after this year, and whatever you can get, you can get. So hopefully a little bit of health, and hopefully the road trip will give them something. The Rockies will be off after tonight's game. They'll have tomorrow off. They will travel to face the Giants. Kyle Freeland will take the hill on Friday night. Kyle 2 and 3 with a 5.63 ERA against another Kyle Harrison of the Giants, who's 5 and 4 with a 3.86. 8:15 p.m. start here in Colorado, because it's out in the Bay Area on Friday. A 10-game road trip against the Giants, Angels, and Padres. An opportunity for the Rockies to make a statement. No, they're not going anywhere, but is this rebuild real? Are these guys really going to look like major league players? And they can show signs of it as the season gets into July and August. They'll have an opportunity to bridge that gap starting on Friday. Broncos training camp is underway. It's exciting to be able to talk about that. Of course, we'll be at training camp on Friday, broadcasting live from practices, and we'll be doing that, by the way, every single weekday. So keep an eye out for that as well. Thanks to Doug Ottewill for joining us. Take a little sidebar to look at the Denver Nuggets and what Russell Westbrook might bring and what it might mean for the Nuggets as they try to make sure they get back going. And of course, the Olympics start later this week as well. Looking forward to talking about that. It won't be all Broncos, because a lot of exciting things going on in the Paris Olympics as well. I love the Olympics. I'm not going to be able to avoid it. So hopefully you do as well. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks to Danny Bailey for making everything work, but mostly thanks to you for joining us. If you watched it on YouTube, please click and subscribe. Go ahead. You'll get all the latest from us. You'll know when we're coming on air. You'll know what we'll be talking about. You'll get it all in advance. You'll be notified as soon as we go live. So that makes it easy for you. And hopefully it gives it an opportunity for us to connect to you in a better way as well. If you're listening on the radio, if you're listening to it on demand, we thank you, each and every one of you, for listening to it. However you do, we want to make sure we give you the best show we can and fit it into your schedule. I'm going to step aside. We're back at it tomorrow. We'll talk about more of the Denver Broncos at training camp. But in the meantime, you can keep it right here. From nearly 25 years, live, local, independent, the best place for you to learn about everything in sports in Colorado. This is Mile High Sports.